Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. Come and eat. Shalom Aleichem, Spirit and Truth Seekers and lovers of Yeshua the Messiah. Welcome to Waters in the Wilderness, the Torah teaching ministry of Hoshana Rabbah Biblical Discipleship Resources. I'm Natan Lawrence, your teacher. And here it is our joy and privilege to connect the message of the gospel to its pro-Torah Hebraic roots, the foundations of our faith. How many of you are tired of churches and religious situations that teach from a holy Bible? Not H-O-L-Y, but H-O-L-E-Y. A holy Bible, a Bible that has holes in it, that does not, where the full counsel of Yehovah's word is not preached from Genesis to Revelation. It's what I call the Swiss cheese version, a Bible that has holes in it. Well, it is our goal and our desire and our privilege to teach from the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. No additions or subtractions. We believe that all the books that are in the Bible are the inspired word of Elohim, and we believe that nothing should be added or subtracted. And from that, we can learn everything we need to know about the path of salvation through Yeshua the Messiah that leads to eternity in the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Elohim. So today, we are in Parashat, as we're continuing our journey through the Torah, we are in Parashat Vayikra. Now, Vayikra is the Hebrew name for the book of Leviticus. The books of the Torah are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Or the Hebrew names for these are Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. So the name for the Hebrew name for the book of Leviticus is Vayikra. And that is based, as is the case with all of the names of the books of the Torah, it is based on the first several Hebrew words that are found at the very first verse of that book. For example, the book of Genesis is Bereshit, and Bereshit is a Hebrew word that means in the beginning. And of course, Genesis 1:1 starts with in the beginning. And similarly, the book of Leviticus starts in Leviticus 1 verse 1. Now Yehovah called to Moses and spoke to him from the tabernacle of the meeting and saying. Then it goes on. So, and he called Vayikra is the phrase there, and Yehovah called, or he called to Moses. So that's where the name Vayikra comes from. Vayikra is the Hebrew word which means and he called. So anyway, we're going to continue in our journey, and we're going to first of all give you kind of a quick overview of the book of Leviticus or Vayikra. And before we do that, I'd like to, as always, draw your attention to our free Torah study guides, which are available on the Hoshana Rabbah website, which you'll see the little tag there that has the name of our website on it. And you can download this Torah study guide for free in PDF format. This is the adult version. And then Torah Explorers, which I have the front page of here, is what we call the teen and the preteen and teenage version, and this is ideal for everybody, whether it's your individual study, family study, homeschool study, group study, congregational study. We have people all over the world that use these resources, and again, they're free. All you have to do is have a computer and click on them and download them, and you can find them at hoshanarabbah.org, hoshanarabbah.org. So now we'd like to jump into the deep end of the pool and get into Leviticus, which is the middle book of the Torah and of the five, and it's kind of the hinge. It's where the middle of the Torah falls in the middle of Leviticus, and it's a very pivotal book, and we're going to explain why in just a few moments. So first of all, I'd like to point out that the book of Leviticus is divided into several main parts. Chapters 1 to 16 deal with the laws of, 1 through 6 deal with the laws of sacrifices. Actually, 1 through 6 is the 1 through 6 or 1 through 7 are the main sacrificial laws. But chapters 1 to 16 deal with the laws of sacrifice and purification. In the second section of Leviticus is chapters 17 through 25. Elohim there sets out his demands for a holy living, that his people might maintain a right relationship with him. And in chapter 26 lays out the blessings and curses for obedience to the laws of the commandments of Elohim. And then the final chapter of the book, the final chapters of the book ends with chapter 27, deals with the some miscellaneous laws, additions. So what are the main themes of the book of Leviticus? Well, as I indicated already, Leviticus stands at the center of the Torah. And there's a reason for this, since it shows man how to come into right relationship with Elohim. Holiness, or being set apart, is the key theme of the book of Leviticus. Holiness. Now, many of you from your church backgrounds, when you hear the word holiness, I'm sure all kinds of things come into your mind about, what your particular church taught about holiness, or maybe it didn't teach anything. But there are certain holiness churches. And some of what they teach is based on the word of Elohim. Some of which they teach is based on traditions of men, which has nothing to do with the Bible. And man-made doctrines. But we want to study what the Bible teaches, how the Bible defines holiness. If Elohim is holy, then his standards tell us how to be holy and what holiness is. And that should be our pattern. That should be our roadmap to follow, not what the doctrines and denominations of men and doctrines of men teach. They may have good things in them, or they may have all kinds of unbiblical traditions that have nothing to do with anything, as is often the case. So holiness, or being set apart, holiness simply means to be set apart from something else. We'll talk about that as we go along, is the key theme of Leviticus. This includes the set apartness or the holiness of Yehovah, and the need for man to become set apart or holy as he is. In fact, we read in Leviticus 11, verse 44, Yehovah says, be holy, or be set apart, or the Hebrew word is kadosh, be kadosh, as I am kadosh. He wants us to be like he is. That is the cry of the Father for his spiritual children. Leviticus goes on and lays out the terms by which an unholy, profane, and a polluted and a sinful people can come into a spiritual, even a contractual and a marital relationship with their holy, morally pure and sinless Creator. Let me read that again. I'm reading from my notes here. Leviticus lays out the terms by which an unholy or profane or polluted or sinful people can come into a right relationship with a perfect, sinless, holy, set-apart Creator, who is Yehovah Elohim. The Torah delineates the terms of the contract or the marital relationship or the body of commandments that show us how to accomplish holiness, and it delineates these terms and also stipulates the penalties for its violation, as well as the blessings to adherence to the words or the commands or the righteous standards of Yehovah Elohim. This is all in the book of Leviticus. Leviticus carries on to completion the giving of the Torah, which started in Exodus chapter 20. So in the previous book, Exodus chapter 20, verses 21 through 23, the commands of Yehovah were given to Moses and the children of Israel. Pardon me. And then after that, pretty much the rest of Exodus, Yehovah gives the instructions to build to the children of Israel to build the tabernacle of Moses, or the Mishkan, and then gives the details of how that was to be accomplished. and it begins to lay out instructions regarding the temple service, or the tabernacle service. Later it became the temple. But then back in Leviticus, we pick back up the more additional Torah commands. And so Torah is beginning to be fleshed out, and more instructions about how to approach a holy and a righteous Kadosh Elohim, and how to live a holy, set-apart lifestyle is now spelled out through the book of Leviticus. Hallelujah. Now, it's interesting to note that even today, Leviticus remains the foundation for Jewish life, since it includes the laws pertaining to diet, the feasts, Yehovah's biblical feasts, sex, marriage, family purity, and the relationship, how we conduct ourselves in right relationship with our fellow man. Leviticus, to emphasize the Jews, to emphasize the importance the Jews place on the message of Leviticus, in Rabbinic Judaism, the book of Leviticus, it is my understanding, is often the book that is taught first to the young children. Like I say, Leviticus is pivotal. It delineates holy and righteous living, and children are pure and in a sense sinless. They're not sinless, but I mean they're not defiled to the degree that adults are once they get past the age of accountability. And so to that pure and impressionable mind, children are inculcated with the message of Leviticus to emphasize and to impress upon them the need to be holy. And in fact, the emphasis, Leviticus is at the heart and core of the modern Jewish synagogue service. The basic daily devotions, the liturgical prayers, and all that are based on the tabernacle, later the temple service, and it's based on everything found in the book of Leviticus. All the offerings and everything, all of this is replicated into the Jewish prayer book. In fact, this is a Jewish prayer book right here, and if you, I get the right cover, if you open this up, you will find that all of the various rites and rituals and the priestly, the things that the priest did in the tabernacle and later the temple, the Jews have now reinterpreted this in the form of prayers and blessings and things that they do every day and on the Sabbath and at other times. And this is all pretty much from the book of Leviticus. Now, the offerings, some more things, key themes about the book of Leviticus. The offerings and other ceremonies are revealed in this book, and they serve to show the holiness of Yehovah. We also learn in the book of Leviticus that Yehovah can only be approached through proper and prescribed protocols. In Leviticus, spiritual set-apartness or holiness, I prefer the term set-apartness because holiness, that's a term that a lot of people have a hard time defining. They think of holiness and they think of real religious, ritualistic, especially when you think of religious rituals that you might find in high religion, pardon me, like the Catholic Church or some of your mainline denominations, and robes and all these rituals and things. And I'm not saying that's all bad. I'm just saying let's define what the Bible says in how the Bible defines holiness. It's a lot more than just religious rituals that may or may not be biblical or have anything to do with the Bible. It has to do with how we live, how we think, what our condition of our heart is, our obedience. It's a very personal thing, and it is a reflection of our relationship with our Creator. He is holy. He wants us to be holy or set apart. Set apart from what? Well, we're going to talk about that. What it means to be set apart. If something is set apart, if I have several objects, I got here in my hand, and I pick one out, and I put it aside and put it over here, then this has been picked out or set apart from this group. In fact, it's interesting to note that the term church, we read the term church in the New Testament or the testimony of Yeshua, the Greek word is ekklesia, and it literally means people who are called out. Called out of what? Well, they're called out of the world. Or the Greek word for in the biblical Greek word for holiness is hagios, or to be set apart. Again, it's just like the word kadosh. So we see this theme carried throughout the Bible, being set apart, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, in Leviticus, spiritual set-apartness is symbolized by physical perfection. All blemishes or defects symbolize man's spiritual defect, which break his spiritual holiness. So in the sacrificial system and with all the ritual purity and the cleansings and the washings, everything that went on, it emphasized the idea that men contain defects. They're not perfect. They were born into this world with defects, and then they take on more defects, sin, and all diseases, sickness, and the things that happen in our lives, and that we need to be purified of these things if we are to be coming into a righteous and a holy relationship with Yehovah Elohim, or at least that's what the system in the Levitical system pointed to. We'll talk more about that later. And of course, it points to something higher than that, and we'll talk about that as well. So, for example, in Leviticus 1 through 7, the animal sacrifices, the animals that were offered on the altar there in the tabernacle before Yehovah were to be perfect animals. Priests in Leviticus 8 through 10 were to be priests without physical deformity. If you were a priest and you had a physical deformity, you were disqualified from serving in the tabernacle. Leviticus 12, a woman was to be ritually purified from hemorrhaging after a childbirth. Ritual purifications from sores, burns, and baldness. That's delineated in Leviticus 13 and 14. Ritual purification from a man's bodily discharges, Leviticus 15, verses 1 through 18. And ritual purification after a woman's menstrual cycle, Leviticus 15, 19 through 33. So all of these pointed to man's need. These were physical things that happen naturally occurring things in a human's physical life, and it all points to our need. These physical things that we are with defect. We're not perfect. We are not flawless. And it points to the fact that we need something more. And of course, we know ultimately it was the most important thing was a heart and a spiritual issue. But these were all prophetic pictures that pointed to that. Now, those with certain diseases or ailments had to leave the camp, for example. It was called the quarantine laws, and this is symbolic of leaving Yehovah's presence. Like Adam and Eve had to leave the Garden of Eden. They were thrust out of the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was a picture of being in perfect communion in the presence of Yehovah Elohim, and once they fell, once they sinned, they were forced out of the presence of Elohim. And similarly, we learn because of this that sin is what breaks our relationship with Elohim. When we sin, we have to repent of our sin. We have to get back in right relationship through the blood of Yeshua the Messiah and have our sins forgiven and washed away. Otherwise, there is a break in the relationship between us and Elohim. We are no longer set apart. We are no longer holy. And that holiness has to be restored. As it says in, I believe it's Hebrews 12:14, without holiness, no one will see Elohim. You cannot come into the presence of a holy Elohim unless you are holy yourself. And we know that is done through our relationship with Yeshua the Messiah. And so to become holy, to be cleansed of sin, to be cleansed of defect, the book of Leviticus points out that there are certain protocols that must be performed, must be followed in order to come back into relationship with a holy, set-apart people. And all of these protocols were orchestrated or were overseen or implemented by the priesthood, by the Levitical priesthood. They oversaw and controlled the sacrifices, rituals, and ceremonies. They all pertain to the tabernacle of Moses. And which really the tabernacle of Moses was like a giant processing center, if you will. It was like a giant assembly line that you come in unclean, if you will, and you come out the other side clean and pure, ready to be in the presence of Elohim. That's really what it was. You come in clean or dirty, and you progressively get cleansed, body, soul, and spirit, mind, will, and emotions, the totality of your being, and ultimately the Holy of Holies there in the inside of the tabernacle is a picture of coming to the presence of Elohim. And so it was the job of the priests to establish Israel as a set-apart or a kadosh nation, and to instruct Israel in spiritual cleanliness and set-apartness, to preserve them spiritually, and to present them to Yehovah as a pure and righteous people. And this is exactly what, we don't have a physical priesthood presently, but we have ministers that Yeshua the Messiah has called to serve and to minister in the body of Messiah. And Paul talks about that in Ephesians 4. In verse 11 it says here, and he, that's Yeshua the Messiah, gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and some teachers. Why? For the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Yeshua, or the kahal, or the church, or the called out ones. And what is the purpose of all this? Till we all come to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature and the fullness of Messiah, that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro, carried with every wind of doctrine, and so forth. So it's to come to become holy, to become perfect or complete in Yeshua, and become like him. He's the one that set us the example of how to obey Yehovah, how to love Yehovah, and to keep his commandments, and to walk in perfection. And that is our example, that is our model, our role model to follow. If we are disciples of Yeshua, then we should be doing exactly what he did. By his mercy and grace. We cannot do it on our own strength, but through his Spirit living in us. Through his power of the resurrected Yeshua living in us, we can obey him and keep his commandments because we love him. And that's exactly what he did. He was an Orthodox Messian, a Jewish rabbi, and we are to follow his example and do what he did if we claim to be the followers of Yeshua. Hallelujah. So those are the main themes in an overall sense of the book of Leviticus. As we continue to study Parashat Vayikra, the first Torah portion in the book of Leviticus, we want to zero in now on the theme of holiness. We've, in the previous section, we discussed the various themes of Leviticus, and the concept of holiness kept coming up. So, as we take our magnifying glass and look at this subject, I'd like to, at this point, ask a question. And I think the answer probably by now should be obvious. But if you were to ask the average Bible-believing Christian on the street, in a church setting or wherever, somebody who claims to be a Christian, and you were to ask them pick one word to define Elohim, what would that word be? What do you think you would primarily hear? In other words, Elohim or God is, and then pick an adjective or a noun that best defines who he is, his character. I would venture to say that the vast majority would say love. And that is an attribute and a characteristic of Elohim. After all, in the book of 1 John it says Elohim is love. And I believe that the church system has skewed the very essence and the character of Elohim and moved, if you will, brainwashed, not in a bad way, but skewed the message of the Bible to believe that Elohim, his number one attribute is love. Yet I would submit to you that that's not what the Bible teaches. Yes, he is love. But his number one attribute is holiness. And I'm about to prove that point. Of course, love is an aspect of his holiness, and it comes out of holiness. But how do I know? What is the number one biblical reason that I can point to back up my claim that holiness is the defining term for his character? Well, in the book of Isaiah and in the book of Revelation, Isaiah chapter 6 verse 3 and Revelation 4:8, we have a couple throne room scenes. Visions that Isaiah and John had of the throne room of Elohim. And up there in the throne room of Elohim, there are spiritual beings that are praising Jehovah day and night for eternity. And one group of them is saying one word over and over and over and over again. It's not love, 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 love. It's kadosh, 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 which translated means set apart, or holy, holy, holy. That I maintain and present to you as, I believe, irrefutable biblical proof that that is his dominant characteristic, is his holiness. He is set apart. Holiness is the dominant or the set apart theme of the book of Leviticus, or one of the, I would say the dominant theme. And I would like to just throw this out. I'm going to get a little edgy here, but I believe that the church has emphasized the love and grace. Grace would probably be your second most dominant theme, that if you were to ask Christians what they think would be the word to describe Elohim or God, they would probably say love, and right after that would be he's gracious, or he's grace. But I would maintain that the church has emphasized that instead of his holiness, because when you emphasize holiness, you're going to emphasize the things that make a person holy and that define holiness. And it brings you back to the book of Leviticus, where he says, "Be holy, for I am holy. Do not eat profane food. Do not eat unclean meats. Do not worship the gods of the heathens. Do not follow their practices. Do not do their holidays. Do not worship their gods. Obey me. Keep my Sabbath. Keep my biblical feasts. Present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and clean and moral and righteous living, cleanliness." And the Christian church emphasizes some of these things, but not other things. But when we talk about holiness, we have to understand what is the opposite of being set apart. Well, we're going to talk about that in a moment. And when we start talking about those things, we start getting into the Torah. What the Torah says and what the Torah defines as the guidelines for righteous standards of righteous living. And that messes with people's lifestyles. It messes with our religious sacred cows and some of these things. And so if we emphasize the message of grace and love, he'll excuse, because he's loving, our Torahlessness. He will excuse the fact that, I don't need certain things in the Bible because I have a theology that says, that was for the Jews. Rip it out of my Swiss cheese Bible. That was for the Israelites way back at the beginning of the book. I don't need that chapter. Rip it out. I don't need the Sabbath. I don't need the feast. I don't need these other standards of holiness and righteousness. I mean, really think about this. Think about this. Yes, he is loving. Yes, he is gracious. But if we can kind of paint him as his dominant characteristic, loving and gracious, then we can excuse our own Torahlessness, our own disobedience to his commandments. Because after all, his grace covers everything. It's what has been called greasy grace, sloppy agape. And it's using that as an excuse for our own sinfulness, our own licentiousness, and our own licentious and sinful theology that says it's all right to break some of his commandments, because after all, we're Gentiles, or that was for them, and now we're, the Jews, and we're not Jewish, or whatever other excuses we want to come up with. But the fact remains, Yehovah Elohim, his standards of righteousness are immutable. They have never changed, because his character never changed. They are a reflection of his character. And he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change, to quote a couple Bible verses there. And he has one set of standards, one set of laws for everyone, for the Jew and the non-Jew, for the Israelites and for all of the earth. And his holiness demands that he judges people that violate his laws, which determine or delineate or spell out or define what holiness is. And people don't really want to think about that. Oh, we're once saved, always saved. We're under grace, so now it doesn't matter what I do. And now we have a lot of people that think they're saved, but they're not. A lot of people that think that they are doing what's right when they do not. They have a lower view of him, and they have formed a religion that suits their own thinking, and it's what we call fig leaf religion. They are taking the word of Elohim and conforming it to their mind, will, and emotions, instead of conforming their mind, their will, and their emotions of their soul man to the Spirit and the Word and the lifestyle of Yeshua the Messiah. These are things that those of us that are coming back to the foundations, the biblical truth foundations of the Bible, and viewing the Torah as our foundation, as our standard of righteousness, as the bedrock foundation, we have to think about these things. And are we going to line our life up with the word of Elohim? Or are we going to stay in Babylon, religious and spiritual Babylon, that Elohim in Revelation 18:4 is calling his people out of, which is Babylon, the Babylonian church system, which is a mixture of truth and error. It's not all bad, but there's a lot of error in there as well. And we want to get back to a more biblical-centered orientation around the word of Elohim, because it's the word of Elohim that's going to judge us and determine what our level, whether we're saved, number one, and number two, what our level of rewards will be in the kingdom of heaven. Pardon me. So let's begin to explore this concept of holiness as a dominant theme in the book of Leviticus, and really the whole Bible. I mean, after all, what does it say on the front of our Bibles? Holy Bible. Here's my Bible with my notes in it. Holy Bible. How many people know what holiness is? Like I said, sadly, too many people have this kind of a Bible. A Holy Bible. The Swiss cheese version, where they rip pages out and they've redefined holiness to fit whatever their traditions of men are, of their particular denomination, or whatever their family has done for generations, or that kind of thing. So, the focus of Leviticus is holiness and holy living. As I said, holiness, I believe, and I believe the Bible teaches it, is the chief attribute of Elohim and the most defining aspect of his character. It has to do with the fact that Elohim is entirely good, without evil and moral and defect, and is sinless. And as I said, that is why the spiritual beings in heaven are declaring before the throne of Elohim day and night, holy, 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 or I prefer the Hebrew word, kadosh, holy. The word holy has pagan implications that go back to the sun god and worship of the sun, pagan sun god. I don't like the term holy and apply it to Elohim. That's why we prefer the English equivalent, set apart, or you use the Hebrew. You can never go wrong using the Hebrew word kadosh. That is why, that is why Yehovah Elohim is called the Kadosh, or the Holy One of Israel in our corrupted English Bibles that have corrupt translations in them. About 30 times in the book of 2 Kings and Psalms and Isaiah and Jeremiah, he's called the Holy One, or the Kadosh, or set apart one of Israel. That's one of his titles. You don't see him as the loving one of Israel. He is loving, but his being set apart, or Kadosh, is actually in the title 30 times, more than 30 times in the Bible. And the high priest, the Kohen HaGadol, Aaron, this brother of Moses, was the first high priest, and he wore a priestly garment. He had a set of priestly garments that he wore when he would go in and minister in the tabernacle, and he had a head plate made out of gold called the golden crown that he wore on his head over the top of the hat that he wore, the cap that he wore. And it said, Kadosh LeYehovah. Kadosh, the Hebrew word is Kadosh LeYehovah, which means holy, or Kadosh unto Yehovah. It didn't say love, it didn't say grace, it didn't say any other attribute, although he is all those things. But the chief attribute was the fact that he was set apart. And we see in the book of Epistle to the Hebrews, Hebrews 12 verse 14, it says that without holiness, no one will see Elohim. Holiness is a prerequisite to coming into the presence of Elohim. In fact, if you look also to emphasize and to substantiate this fact that holiness is the dominant characteristic of Elohim, the tabernacle of Moses, or the Mishkan, was divided into two parts. In Hebrew, it's the Kadosh, the holy, or the set apart place, and the Kadosh HaKadoshim, the holy of holies, or the most holy place. Now we know that the word holy or holiness is defined as sacredness, consecrated or set apartness, or separateness. And it's in contradistinction to, or separate from, the sphere of the common, the profane, the defiled, or the polluted. So you have on one side that which is set apart, that which is pure, that which is sinless, that which is perfect. And that on the other side you have that which is polluted, impure, defiled, and sinful. The realm of man and this world belongs to this side, the latter. The realm of the heavenly, or of Elohim, belongs to the set apart, the pure, the perfect, the undefiled, the holy. And like I said, the tabernacle of Moses was divided into the holy place and the holy of holies. And the tabernacle of Moses, according to, I believe it's Exodus 25 verse 8, Yehovah had the Israelites build the tabernacle so he might have a dwelling place in the midst of the people of Israel. He had to dwell in a replica of his throne room, a replica of heaven, and that tabernacle was a replica of that. And he dwelt there among his people in the pillar of fire. And that's why it was called the holy place and the holy of holies, because he is Kadosh, he is set apart, he is the Kadosh one of Israel. He could not live out there among his people who were profane and polluted and defiled, and only those who were cleaned up, only those who were in a state of holiness could come in to the tabernacle. The priests before they ministered, and the Levites had to get clean. They had to go through ritual purification. They had to put on clean clothes. They had to clean themselves up, get washed. And if they had sinned, they had to get that taken care of before they could come in. If they came into the Holy of Holies in an undefiled state, or into the tabernacle in a defiled state, I should say, it was a death sentence. We cannot come into the presence of Elohim in heaven, or wherever he happens to be, without going through protocols. Now we understand this on the earthly level. If I am invited to the White House to a meeting with the President of the United States, or the Queen of England in her palace in Buckingham Palace in London, I'm not going to come in out of the barnyard after cleaning out the the chicken house or the cow barn, like I grew up on a farm, and after I cleaned those things out, it was pretty messy. I'm not going to come in, out of the field after digging and fertilizing and plowing and planting and pruning my trees and working all day, smelly and dirty and dusty and muddy and all that, and go and in my dirty ripped work clothes and go meet with the Queen of England or the President of the United States. No, I'm going to get cleaned up. I'm going to buy some clothes. I'm going to get my hair, and I'm going to look the best I possibly can, that I can possibly afford. And then you have to follow the protocols to come into the presence of one of these earthly dignitaries. You don't just hop the fence of the White House and walk into the White House and into the Oval Office to meet with the president. You don't do that. You will get arrested and probably put in jail because you're coming in illegally. The same is true with the creator of the universe. And yet, human beings who have Swiss cheese Bibles just think that they can come to Elohim any old way they want and rip pages out of the Bible and say, we don't need this and we don't need that, and the things that the standards that he has laid down and the truths that he has laid down and the protocols that he's established for coming to his presence, we don't need that stuff anymore. I got Jesus. And I can come in any old blank way I please because I got Jesus. What a shameful, despicable, rebellious, defiant, bratty attitude. And the creator of the universe will not tolerate such insolence and such disrespect for his holiness. He will not. Such people will not come into his presence until they are on their face and repenting of their sins and getting their heart straightened around. And there's too many people in the church that are defiant, and they think that Elohim is duty bound to grant them everything that they think is their right to have. Well, that is not what the Bible teaches. It's about that time that we got that stinking thinking out of our brain. Unfortunately, too many in the church have absorbed that kind of nonsense. To them, he's a big sugar daddy in the sky that owes them. No, he doesn't owe us squat. We owe him every breath, every second of life, and he could take it away in a heartbeat. And he doesn't owe us anything. We owe him everything. And if he didn't give us eternal life, then he doesn't owe us that either. We have so defamed him, profaned him, polluted, defiled. We are so sinful, ungrateful, rebellious. We are so sick. Our righteousness is as filthy menstrual rags, as the book of Isaiah says. We need to humble ourselves because we're coming into the presence of the mighty King. And yes, we have a great high priest, Yeshua the Messiah, is our advocate up there. And we have the blood of Yeshua. But that blood of Yeshua is not going to be efficacious if we come in with a rebellious, selfish, defiant, willful, arrogant attitude. Nobody with that frame of mind will come into the presence of Elohim. You don't even stand a chance. So, we need to follow his rules, his protocols, and do what he says. He's the king of the universe. He's the creator. He made everything. He's the lawgiver, and he establishes the protocols. Not us, not our theologians, and I don't care how many degrees they have behind their name. I don't care how big and powerful their denomination is. If it doesn't line up with the word of Elohim, it is chaff. It is a tear. It is profane. It is a tradition of man that is going to blow away with the wind, with the breath of Yehovah's coming. It's going to melt in the presence of his face, whose face shines like the sun. It's going to be wood, hay, and stubble that's going to get burned up in his judgments. So we need to think about this. So Elohim gave Moses and Aaron and the priest strict protocols to follow to ensure that the tabernacle stayed holy and to keep it from becoming profane, polluted, or defiled. As I said, the tabernacle represents heaven, the abode of Yehovah, the holy, the heaven, and the Holy of Holies represents his throne room. It was a mirror of the heavenly. So everything that happened there in the tabernacle was a picture of coming into the presence of Elohim in heaven. If these protocols weren't followed for coming into his presence, that is, the proper handling of the building, its furnishings, the priestly attire, bodily, ritualistic, and spiritual cleanliness, if they were not followed, there were penalties. Some of them even carried a death penalty with them if they were not properly followed. Remember Nadab and Abihu offered profane fire. They did not follow certain protocols, and Yehovah struck them dead. They were the priests that were ministering, the sons of Aaron ministering in the tabernacle. In fact, there's indications that they were intoxicated by liquor. That's why they were struck down. They did not follow what he told them to do. If, on the other hand, they did follow, the priests did follow Yehovah's protocols and did it the right way and honored his holiness, then they a blessed relationship encountered. They heard his voice, they were in his presence, his anointing was there. It was a beautiful, wonderful thing. So for the requirements for coming to the tabernacle of Moses, which is a picture of the dwelling place of Elohim, or his presence, Exodus 25 verse 8 teaches us several things. First, Elohim is holy and undefiled, or set apart, and thus he's transcendent above the earthly and human plane. So he is pure and set apart above the sinful or the human plane. He's up there, he's up, he's not down, he's up, he's above us in his holiness, his perfection. Second, heaven and the presence of Elohim is a holy or set apart and undefiled, pure place where there is no sin. And the tabernacle was the earthly dwelling place of Elohim's presence. Again, Exodus 25 verse 8. It and everything about it was to remain holy or set apart. Nothing was to defile it. Third, maintaining a high standard of holiness with regard to everything pertaining to the tabernacle teaches us that no one can come into the presence of Elohim without first going through proper protocols to become undefiled. We have all been defiled by sin, and we've all been defiled by sinful people and sinful situations around us. Remember what Isaiah said in, Isaiah chapter 1? I am a man of unclean lips among a generation of people who of unclean lips. So, we may be pure and kadosh, but we are still impure because of the people we hang out with. And Elohim was merciful and gracious, and he said to Isaiah, hey, don't worry about that. That doesn't disqualify you. I will purify you. And he sent an angel. I think it's actually in Isaiah chapter 6. I said chapter 1. But he sent, yes, Isaiah chapter 6. In fact, that's where it's saying, Kadosh, 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 6 verse 3, is Yehovah Saviot. The earth is full of his glory. And then Yehovah called Isaiah, and Isaiah in verse 5 says, woe is me, for I'm undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, Yehovah Saviot. I mean, he was like petrified. And of course, then one of the seraphim flew to Elohim, toward Isaiah, having in his hand a live coal which he had taken with the tongs from the altar that's in heaven, and he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, this has touched your lips, your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. And then Elohim commissioned Isaiah to go forth. So we need to be purged of our sins. And Leviticus shows us, points toward Yeshua the Messiah, the one who can do that. We'll talk more about that briefly in a little bit. So, fourth, there was a death sentence upon those who refused or neglected to follow these protocols. This teaches us that man is to fear and to honor and to respect and even to dread Elohim, who has the power over life and death. Man cannot come into Elohim's presence in a casual, cavalier, arrogant, rebellious, bratty, impudent manner, in a defiled or polluted state. Fifth, the holiness of Elohim, which is the dominant theme of the book of Leviticus, teaches us that the tabernacle of Moses, as I stated earlier in this teaching, was like a processing center to aid man in going from the holy, polluted, the unholy, polluted, and sinful state to progressively becoming more and more set apart and sinless. Eventually, man could come into a place by following Yehovah's protocols of holy living, of intimate fellowship. He could come into a place of intimate fellowship with the Creator of the universe. This is pictured by the inner room or the Holy of Holies of the tabernacle, which is where the presence of Elohim was, and is a picture of his throne room, where it is being declared night and day, holy, 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 set apart, set apart, set apart to him, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. And of course, as I've already stated, the kadosh HaKadoshim, or the kadosh, most kadosh place, or the Holy of Holies, is a picture of the throne room of Elohim. Sixth, man was created in Elohim's image to have an intimate relationship with him and to eventually reflect his divine nature, to actually take on the divine nature. When man sinned in the garden, man's relationship with Elohim was cut off, and man was thrust out of the garden because he could not remain in the garden in the holy or set apart atmosphere of Yehovah Elohim. Well, the tabernacle of Moses shows man how to deal with the pollution or defilement of sin through the blood atonement, and eventually it pointed, of sacrificed animals, it pointed to the eventual sacrifice of Yeshua, or the death of Yeshua on the cross, which all the bloody sacrifices pointed. Seventh, there is no other way for man to come into the presence of Elohim except through the protocols that he has established. Man has to first recognize his sinfulness and turn away from his sin, turn away from his state of unholiness or pollution by making the proper sacrifices. This is what the book of Leviticus teaches us. He must then turn to and embrace Elohim's holy or righteous standards of living a sinless life, and that's the Torah. The Torah, which is the foundation and eventually of the whole Bible, and eventually then all the rest of the Bible, all the way through the book of Revelation. So this message of holiness and the message of the entire Bible can be summed up by Elohim's loving and longing cry to his people on several occasions in the book of Leviticus, where he says, "Be holy, you people, my people, be holy, for I am holy." I want to have a relationship with you, but I am set apart, I'm transcendent. I cannot have a relationship with sinful people. The sin issue that broke the relationship between me and your forefathers back in the Garden of Eden, and has continued to this day, has to be dealt with. And here's the way that it can be dealt with. And this is what the book of Leviticus teaches. And he says that I am holy, for you are holy. Be holy, for I am holy. The heart of the Father crying out for his people. He mentions that several times, or that cry comes out several times, and is recorded in the book of Leviticus, in Leviticus 11:44, Leviticus 11:45, Leviticus 20 verse 7 and 26, and then it's repeated in the testimony of Yeshua in 1 Peter 1 verse 16. Now the Torah shows us how to be holy. Leviticus 20 verse 7 through 8. I'm going to actually turn there real fast. Leviticus 20, 7 through 8. I think every once in a while it's important that we read some of these verses. He says, "Consecrate yourselves therefore and be holy, for I am holy. I am your Yehovah your Elohim, and you shall keep my statutes and perform them. I am Yehovah who sanctifies you." In other words, who cleans you up. I will clean you up. I will set you apart aside for a holy purpose, but I got to clean you up first because you're kind of dirty. Sin has made you pretty dirty. The Torah shows us how to be holy. And the Torah, along with the rest of the scripture, shows us that being holy not only involves behavior, but man's thoughts and attitudes, words, physical cleanliness, as well as observance of holy times like his Sabbaths and his feasts, as well as the food we put in our body. In fact, twice there in Leviticus 11, which is the chapter that lays out the biblical dietary laws, the primary issue there is not health, it's holiness. Yes, if you eat and follow the biblical diet, don't eat unclean meat, you will be healthier. but it's mostly a holiness issue. He says if you eat animals that eat garbage and are the garbage cans and the garbage processing plants, if you will, of the body of the earth, like pigs and shellfish that eat the garbage, that are garbage disposals, then you're going to be taking that stuff inside of you and you're going to defile yourself spiritually, and you're also going to be defiling yourself physically and potentially bringing in diseases into your body. You are the temple of the Spirit, and you cannot be taking this in. You've got to come out of this. This is part of how we put on holiness, is by the food we eat. And by the physical things that we do, like putting leavening out of our houses during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or we do it before the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but that shows us the importance of cleaning our spiritual houses of sin. Similarly, when we eat only the kind of foods that He has said that we can eat, it's emphasizing to us the importance of taking care of our temples, which is where He wants to live through His Spirit. So let's view ourselves as holy, as set apart in everything that we do. The day that we keep the Sabbath, the day that we the holidays we keep, as well as the food we eat. Drop my glasses. All right. So men must learn to make a division between, or a separation between, the spheres of the holy and the profane, and to keep them separate. So to understand what holiness is, we also have to understand what the profane or the polluted is. And then we have to make these distinctions. And as we go through life, we're constantly having to make these distinctions. If I do this, is this going to make me holy? Is this going to keep me holy? Or is this going to pollute me and profane me? And we have to make these distinctions. And we have to make right decisions based on not what we think, not how we feel, not what is popular, not what our church says, not what the world says, but what does the word of Elohim say? And then we line our lives up with the word of Elohim. If Elohim says, do this, don't do this, eat this, don't eat this, worship me on these days, do this on these times, and this and that, dress this way, don't dress that way, listen to this kind of music, not this kind of music, conduct your life in this kind of a way or not, we have to then evaluate everything we do. Make a difference between the holy and the profane. And the problem with the problem is a lot of people don't know what that is. And that's why we're making this teaching, to help you to understand this. They have not been taught in the churches what true biblical holiness is. In fact, most of your pastors really don't know what it is, and Bible teachers, because they maybe have some idea, but they're not walking it out, not unless they're following the Torah. Not just intellectually, but actually doing it. So not just a head trip. This is about doing things. And as we do, then that will, as we think and as we do, then that will transform our lives into the image of Yeshua the Messiah, who was holy, who lived a holy life, and who was perfectly pure and without any sin whatsoever. And that's the model we want to follow. That's who we want to become like. We want to have His divine nature be part. We want our nature to become reflective of and exactly like His divine nature. And if a pastor or a Bible teacher doesn't know what the biblical standards of holiness is, and he's going to be teaching people impurity. And that's to the degree that they cannot come to Yehovah. That's to that degree it's going to keep them away from Him. So we need to go higher in our spiritual walk and understand and make a difference between the holy and the profane. And it starts with godly and righteous leadership. And we read this in Ezekiel 44 verse 23 and 22 verse 26. One of these verses talks, Yehovah's criticizing the priesthood of that day for not making a difference between the holy and the profane. And then he's saying, I'm going to raise up a kadosh priesthood who will make a difference between the holy and profane, because they understand the foundations of the Torah, which is where then specifically the book of Leviticus, where that is laid out. So, yes, holiness is the defining characteristic of Yehovah Elohim, and it is also the dominant theme of the book of Leviticus. And we benefit ourselves if we understand what that is, what holy, true biblical holiness is, and how to practice it and walk it out in our lives. And there are great blessings and rewards for those that will do this. Now, as we continue our study in the book of Leviticus, the first parashah or Torah portion of Leviticus, which is Leviticus 1 through 6, or the first part of chapter 6, in this section of Leviticus, we see an overview of the sacrificial system. Many studies have been made on the sacrificial system, and I have done some in the past, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but I want to talk about how the sacrificial, what it pointed to, and how that affects us now. But let me just offer these opening comments on this subject. Although the Jewish and Christian scholars disagree about whether the sacrifices were to cease after the coming of the Messiah, or Yeshua the Messiah, to all agree that the object of the sacrifice was substitution for offenders. In other words, it was the sacrificial system was based on if somebody sinned, then this animal or this offering was made, or sacrificed or offered up to Yehovah in place of or as a substitute for the sinner. Now, we know that these substitutionary sacrifices pointed to none other than the Messiah, Yeshua the Messiah. Nobody else has ever lived on the face of the earth from then until now that fulfilled that. Only Yeshua. Now, we see the idea that the sacrificial system in Leviticus would point forward to the Messiah. In the early pre-rabbinic Jewish literature, this understanding is especially expressed in the proto or the pre-rabbinic biblical Aramaic commentaries called the Targumim, or Targums. Some people hear that term, but in Hebrew it would be Targumim. These were the Aramaic translations of the Hebrew scriptures, or the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, into Aramaic, because when the Jews were taken into captivity to Babylon, they learned Aramaic. And so they were there for 70 years and they learned Aramaic. And so they needed the Hebrew translate of the Old Testament translated into Aramaic so they would understand that. And we especially see these in the Targum Yonatan and the Jerusalem Targums. Now these are specific translations, and they were not actual translations, they were more commentaries. They were translations with commentaries. But if you go back and read them, and I have done research in this and have published one article, it's on our website on that subject, proving the deity of Yeshua from not from the New Testament, but from the Old Testament, or the Tanakh. Or I did about a 20 or 30 page teaching proving his deity from the writings of the pre-rabbinic Jewish scholars themselves, from the Hebrew linguistics in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, as well as proving his deity, his incarnation and deity from the Hebrew texts themselves in the Old Testament, and I include in that translations from the Targumim, which show that the early Jews before the pre-Christian era, they knew that the Messiah was coming, and they thought he was going to come around the 4,000 year mark, which was 2,000 years ago, which is when Yeshua came. Of course, then when he came, they didn't recognize him. Well, some did. Obviously, the apostles and disciples and the followers of Yeshua did, and they were all Jews. But the rest of them didn't, and of course, they killed him. And the rabbinic Jews have not recognized him to this day, to their detriment. So, but later rabbinic sages, that would be after the Christian era, in light of the rise of Christianity, were loath to accept the interpretation of their earlier scholars and sages that where those earlier scholars and sages interpreted the biblical prophets or prophecies, messianic prophecies that pointed to Yeshua, they interpreted them in such a way that when Yeshua showed up, he fit the definition of what they were anticipating was going to come, who was going to come, or the person that would come as the Messiah. He would fit those protocols or those conditions. Well, then when Yeshua showed up, they rejected what their sages said, and they said, no, he couldn't be the one. And then we have modern rabbinic Judaism to this day that has not accepted Yeshua yet. They will someday, but at his second coming. And I mean, some have, those that have, hallelujah, but the majority have not. The majority of Jews have not. So now, and so they don't believe that he fulfilled or that the sacrificial system pointed to him. But eventually they will come to that understanding. We read that in the book of Zechariah. They will look upon him whom they pierced, and they will receive him as like a beloved son. Now, as the Tanakh or the Old Testament progresses, the concept of the substitutionary sacrifice as it relates to the sinner and to the Messiah expands and unfolds. The unity of the Tanakh in this regard and its progression of revelation on this subject must be taken into consideration when studying the sacrifices listed in Leviticus and the rest of the Torah, for that matter, if we are to understand completely the biblical concept of substitutionary sacrifice as well as the messianic prophecies. So the concept of sacrifice in the Tanakh, and especially as laid out here in the book of Leviticus, leads us in progressive stages to the suffering of the Messiah on behalf of sinners. Such passages in the Tanakh as Psalms 22, Psalm chapter 2, chapter 22, 35, 69, 72, 89, 110, and 119, along with Isaiah 52, and starting in verse 13, going all the way to Isaiah 53, verse 12 to the end of the chapter there, along with many other scriptural passages, point undeniably to the person and work of Yeshua the Messiah, along with his suffering and glory, as having fulfilled those biblical prophecies and sacrificial system. So throughout the Old Testament, from the time of Adam and Eve forward, there's been a progressive revelation, an unfolding, pointing toward Yeshua the Messiah. And a lot of different shadows and types and pictures and antitypes, and the sacrificial system all pointed to him. We see that in the book of, throughout the Bible, but especially the writer of Hebrews really makes that to come alive. Now, we have 6 different, in Leviticus chapter 1 through 7, we have 6 different offerings that were offered on the altar. Some people say 5. I say 6. There were actually 6 if you include the wine libation. There was the burnt offering, which is talked about in Leviticus 1, verses 3 through 17. There was the meal or the grain offering called the mincha offering. The burnt offering was called the olah. The meal, grain, or meat offering, but it was actually a grain offering, is called the mincha offering, and that's talked about in Leviticus verse 2, verse 1 through 16, and again in 6:14 through 23. And then there's the sin offering, the chatat offering. That's Leviticus 4:1 through 35, and again in Leviticus 6:24 through 30. And there's a trespass or guilt offering called the asham offering, Leviticus 5:14 through 19, and again in 6:5 through 7, and then finally in Leviticus 7:1 through 7. And then there's a peace or the fellowship offering called the shalom. It's where the word shalom, their cognates. The shalom or the shalom offering, the peace or fellowship offering, that's Leviticus 3:1 through 7, and again in chapter 7, 1 through 36. And finally, we have the drink offering or the wine libation, Genesis 35:14. It's also mentioned in Exodus 29:40 through 41, Numbers 28:7 through 10, and through the rest of that chapter. So I am not going to spend time going through each of these offerings and how they all pointed to Yeshua. Others have done teachings on that. I have done teachings on that. But what I want to do at this point is I want us to turn to Leviticus, not Leviticus, we're already there, Isaiah 52. And I'm going to read this entire passage because Yeshua fulfilled everything. And then I'm going to read some passages in the book of Hebrews to show how all of these offerings all pointed to him. We're going to start reading in Isaiah 52 in verse 13, I believe. Is that correct? I believe so. Behold, my servant shall deal prudently. Speaking about Yeshua the Messiah, the sin-bearing servant. He shall be exalted and extolled and be very high. Just as many were astonished at you, so his visage or his face was marred more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. So shall he sprinkle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths at him. For what had not been told them they shall see, and what they had not heard they shall consider. Isaiah 53:1. Who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of Jehovah been revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness, and when we see him, in my Bible the word him is capitalized, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid as it were our face from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, and yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by Elohim, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Jehovah has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, as a sheep before its shearers in silence. So he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. Who will declare his generations? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken, and they made his grave with the wicked, and with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased Jehovah to bruise him. He has put him to grief. When you make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, speaking about the resurrection, and the pleasure of Jehovah shall prosper in his hand, and he shall see the labor of his soul, and see the light, in other words, be resurrected, and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant shall justify many, and he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore I will divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many, and he made intercession for the transgressors. This is the greatest passage, prophetic passage in the entire Old Testament or Tanakh, that points to the work of Yeshua that he did on the cross as our substitutionary sacrifice, and how all the sin offerings, all the sin sacrifices done in the temple and the tabernacle, everything laid out here in the book of Leviticus, all pointed forward to him. As I said a moment ago, no human being, nobody else has ever come on the earth in the entire history of the earth except Yeshua the Messiah that fulfilled this to the letter. No other human being. You cannot name a human being. There is no one. Only Yeshua the Messiah fulfilled this prophecy. Arguments of men notwithstanding, the truth will stand. And the doctrines of men by which the word of Elohim has been made of none effect to in any way invalidate Yeshua's fulfillment of that prophecy will not stand. It is wood, hay, and stubble, and it will come into the light of the truth, and it will be dissipated by the breath and the fire of Yehovah Elohim on Judgment Day. And every knee will bow to Yeshua the Messiah. Every tongue will confess, without exception. So says the Bible. Now I'd like for us to turn, that was in Isaiah 52 and 53. Now let's turn to Hebrews. And in the book of Hebrews, the writer shows us very wonderfully how Yeshua fulfilled the sacrificial system and became the Lamb of Elohim, the sin offering to take away our sins. Let's start reading in Hebrews 9, verse 11, and we'll read through verse 15. But Messiah came as high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling of the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? For this is the reason he is the mediator of the new covenant, by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of eternal inheritance, or eternal life. Now let's go over to the next chapter and start reading in Hebrews 10, verse 4. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. Therefore, when he came into the world, he said, that is when Yeshua came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire. He's quoting from Psalms here. But a body you have prepared for me. In burnt offering and sacrifices for sin you had no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come. In the volume of the book it is written of me, to do your will, O Elohim. Previously saying, sacrifice and offering, burnt offering and offerings for sin you did not desire, nor have pleasure in them, which are offered according to the law. Then he said, behold, I have come to do your will, O Elohim. He takes away the first, and he may establish the second. By that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Yeshua once for all. So let us now ask the question, knowing that Yeshua fulfilled the sacrificial system, what is the benefit of studying the sacrificial system, and what was the purpose of the sacrificial system? So I'd like to discuss this now, and then we're going to take this discussion to even a higher level beyond this, which we've already alluded to, but I won't tell you what that is, so that you will have a sense of anticipation and you'll want to continue listening to this study, hopefully. So what was the purpose of the sacrificial system in the first place? Well, the concept of animal sacrifices may be hard for modern people to comprehend. It's kind of a squeamish concept, the concept of death and blood. You know, I grew up on a farm, and we did almost all of our own butchering. And we did a lot of butchering, and it's not a pleasant sight. It's a bloody mess. We had sheep. I was a shepherd. We raised sheep. I was a shepherd for 15 years, took care of the sheep from birth until the time we had to slaughter them, because that was our source of meat. And we had chickens, we had cattle, we had other kinds of goats, and other kinds of kosher fowl. And we did all of our own butchering, and I didn't really enjoy that, but we had to do that. But some people, and I got used to it. But it's not something that most people are familiar with. But it's something that in the ancient nomadic style of the inhabitants of the ancient Middle East, this is something where they had flocks of goats and sheep and cattle, and butchering, animal husbandry, of which butchering was an aspect, was something that was they understood it. In fact, this was like necessary for their survival. So for these people this was their lifestyle. The animal sacrifice had great symbolic significance to these people whose daily existence was tied to the earth and was dependent on domestic animals for survival. So it's out of this cultural background that the biblical narrative springs, and with it, including with it, the symbols that the ancient people of that day could relate to. And that included animal husbandry, a raising of agricultural crops, as well as slaughtering of animals. So with these things in mind, the following, we're going to go through a list of the main reasons that Yehovah established the animal sacrificial system as a means to help man to understand the spiritual lessons far beyond the sacrificial system itself. So there are spiritual lessons that these sacrifices pointed to. And that's what we want to focus on. We read in Galatians 3 verse 19, a verse that is misunderstood by a lot of people, but after studying this for 50 years, I've personally come to the conviction that what this is referring to the animal sacrifices. We read here, what purpose then does the law serve? It was added because of transgression, till the seed, capital S, that's Yeshua, should come to whom the promise was made. I believe this law that was added is referring to the sacrificial system. The law of Elohim has always been around from the very beginning. But the elaborate sacrificial system, with all of its protocols, the Levitical system, was put into place later. It was added to the rest of the Torah because of sin, and is in force until Messiah would come. Because after Yeshua died, a few years later, the temple was destroyed by the Romans, and the sacrificial system was abolished, and there's never been a sacrificial system since then, since the temple has been destroyed. When and why did Yehovah add the sacrificial system, this law, to the Torah? This occurred after and because of the sin of the golden calf. When the Israelites turned away from Elohim at the golden calf, he set the Levites aside because they were faithful to him. They had remained faithful. And he set them aside. He says, you will now, I'm going to give you the temple tabernacle service, and you're going to teach the people my ways, and you're going to demonstrate my ways. This rebellious, sinful, defiant people that still has a penchant for following the gods of Egypt. You turned away from me after all that I've done for you, brought you out of Egypt. You heard my voice. I led you through the Red Sea and miracles after miracles, and yet you still turned away. So he separated the priests at that time, and he gave the people a rigid system of do's and don'ts, sacrifices they had to make if they sinned, penalties, all of these things, protocols, all relating to the sacrificial Levitical system that was in place until Yeshua came. And then at that point, Yeshua wrote his Torah in people's hearts on the day of Pentecost. So that would be, they would have that internal guidance, that internal gyro compass, if you will, that would point them in the right direction to obeying him from within. They'd have the internal drive, the miraculous power of the Spirit from the inside to help them. So that because prior to that, the people were stiff-necked and rebellious. And we still are. But thankfully we have the Spirit to lead and guide us. So Yeshua fulfilled that system, as we've talked about. So it was like a tutor. In a sense, it talks about that in the book of Galatians, chapter 3 also, or literally a pedagogy, a one that would guide us to the cross, our need for Yeshua. Because every time you sin, you've got to take an animal, you've got to pay a price, and pretty soon you're not going to have anything left. You're not going to have any flocks. You're not going to have any money in your bank account. And that obviously, that did not fulfill the need of man. Every time he sins, he's got to offer up an animal. How big does your flock have to be? How many innocent animals do you have to sacrifice every time you sin? And if you have a big family with lots of kids, I mean, this could get to be an impossible thing. This could be a yoke that is impossible for human beings to bear. That is why we need to put our faith in Yeshua the Messiah, who died for our sins, whose life was worth more than all the lives of all the human beings that ever lived, because he created us. He made us. It says that in John 1, in Colossians 1, in Hebrews 1, that Yeshua in his pre-incarnate state made us. Therefore his life is more valuable than all of us. All of our lives put together. That's why his life, he could die for all of our sins. So what was the purpose of the sacrificial system? It was added because of sin, to point us to Yeshua the Messiah. Also, the Levitical system foreshadowed and pointed to the Messiah's ultimate sacrifice. And that's in Hebrews 9, verse 11 through 12, which we already read. The tabernacle offerings were specifically designed to spiritually draw the offerer near to Elohim through the sacrifice of the prescribed animal. Psalm 51, 16 through 17, Psalm 50, 12 through 15, and compare that with 1 Peter 2, 11 through 12. Elohim commanded offerings to assist the offerer to better understand himself, his attitude, and his personal relationship with Elohim. Genesis 3:21, Genesis 4, 3 through 5, Genesis 8:20, Genesis 22, 1 through 2, and 1 Corinthians 11:28. Altars were erected by the patriarchs in order to honor Elohim through sacrifice after having had direct contact with Elohim. We see that in numerous places through Genesis and even into Exodus. Exodus 17, 13 through 16, and so forth. Proper regular sacrificial offerings kept the children of Israel in direct contact with Elohim, the Elohim of the patriarchs. Exodus 5:3, Exodus 10:25, and 1 Timothy 2:5. To make the offerer holy or set apart, so that is the purpose of the sacrifice, was to make the sacrificial system was to make the offerer holy or set apart, so that he would be allowed to approach and commune with the set apart Elohim of Israel. Isaiah 53:15, Isaiah 57:15, Leviticus 19 verse 2, and 2 Corinthians 6:16 through 18. Under certain circumstances, blood, as used in the Levitical system, could serve as a purification agent for both people and objects. Hebrews 9:18 through 23, along with Luke 2 verses 23 through 24. The blood of animal sacrifices served to cover the offerer's sins, thereby allowing him to draw near to the set-apart Elohim of Israel. However, the offerer could only be forgiven for specific sins through full repentance and by returning to Elohim's way of life as outlined in the Torah. Leviticus 1 verse 4, Leviticus 4:35, Leviticus 23, 27 through 28, Hebrews 10, 3 through 4, and compare that with Romans 4, 7 through 8. And finally, what was the purpose of the sacrificial system? The purpose of the animals offered by the Levitical priesthood served as a shadow of the blood of the Messiah, which does not merely cover our sins, but removes all the sins of the person who accepts Yeshua's offering of himself for that sinner. And we already read some of these. Hebrews 9:11 through 12, Hebrews 9:24 through 28, 1 Peter 1:18 through 19, Ephesians 5:25 through 27, Leviticus 25:47 through 49, Romans 5:11, John 1:29, and compare that with Hebrews 13:10 through 13. So that's why we needed the sacrificial system. And that is why it helps lead us to and point us to Yeshua the Messiah. Now we're going to switch gears. And I told you, as we're studying the sacrificial system, that we wanted to take this thing to a higher, much higher level. And now I want to talk about prayer. I want to talk about service and obedience to Yehovah Elohim, and how this has now replaced animal sacrifices. When one sinned, they had to offer up in the Old Testament dispensation, if you will. They had to offer up sacrifices to cover their sins. But that is not ultimately what Yehovah wanted. And throughout the Old Testament or the Tanakh, we see that Yehovah began to reveal something higher. Not only the Messiah, that is the most important thing that the animal sacrifices pointed to, but he wanted his people to be a living sacrifice. As Yeshua went on the cross to die for our sins, when we are baptized for the remission of sins, it's at that point, go read Romans 6, 1 through 6, it's at that point that we identify with the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua, and we ourselves are to go to the grave, go down on the cross with Yeshua, so that we can be resurrected like Yeshua, starting with our spirit man, and then eventually our soul and our body man when we receive our glorification at the resurrection. It's a process. And so we are to identify with the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua by becoming living sacrifices. Previously, in a previous Torah study, I explained how in the tabernacle of Moses, the furnishings in there were shaped like a cross. If you look at how they are lined out, they're shaped like a cross. And the Israelites were camped around the tabernacle of Moses in a cross configuration, or I prefer to say a Paleo-Hebrew letter Tav. And that's in Numbers chapter 2. We see how they were laid out perfectly like a cross. And that's a picture of Yeshua. The tabernacle points to his work on the cross, but then we as believers are to also lay down on the cross to identify, we are to die to ourselves, die to our flesh nature, accept the sin sacrifice of Yeshua, and then be resurrected in the newness of life. We become a new creation, born again of the Spirit. And eventually, if we overcome, we will then have what's called the theosis. We will take on the nature of Elohim and receive immortality and become children of Elohim. We will be like him, for we shall see him as he is. In the meantime, we are to be living sacrifices. So let's read what some of the Old Testament or the scriptures in the Tanakh point to this, and that Yah was looking for something in the lives of his people far beyond what these physical sacrifices pointed to. Let's read in Psalm 51, starting in verse 16. This is David speaking. For you do not desire sacrifice, or else I would give it. You do not delight in burnt offering. The sacrifices of Elohim are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. These, O Elohim, you will not despise. Then you shall be pleased with the sacrifices of righteousness, with burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. Then they shall offer bulls on your altar. So it was very important that when the people offered these offerings, these sacrifices, that they do so with a right heart. It all got back to the heart. You could offer an offering. You could maybe sin and offer an offering in because of your sin. But if you didn't have a right heart, when you offer that, a heart of repentance, recognizing that your sin is what killed that animal, your offering would not be accepted. So the condition of the heart of the offerer was essential to Elohim. Hosea 14:2, and I quote, take words with you, or return to Yehovah. Say to him, take all iniquity, receive us graciously, for we will offer the sacrifice, or the calves of our lips. So here, the Hosea was revealed to the prophet Hosea that we could make offerings to Yehovah through our lips. And that's why I said a little bit earlier, the Jewish sages, the rabbinic Jews understand these scriptures. And that's why, as I pointed out earlier, I pulled down off my library shelf here, a Jewish prayer book. This is an Orthodox Jewish art scroll. This is the Sephardic, not Sephardic, the a Sephardic rather, prayer book. There's an Ashkenazic and a Sephardic prayer book. This is the Sephardic one. But they understand that prayer and worship and praise and confessions are an aspect of sacrifice because of these scriptures we're reading. And that's why today, the Jews, Orthodox Jews that are practicing their religion, every day they make prayers and they daven and they pray and they read liturgy and they recite the things in here, because this has replaced in their mind the sacrificial system when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. And it's because of these verses we're reading here. Psalm 69, verse 30, I will praise the name of Yehovah with a song, and I will magnify him with thanksgiving. This also shall please Yehovah better than an ox or a bull, which has horns and hooves. So again, Yehovah is looking for our hearts. He's looking for a confession of our mouths. He's looking for this is what's more important to him, a circumcised heart, than physical circumcision. An animal or our heart that is laid on the altar before him in humble submission and repentance, than us just throwing blood at him and offering an animal and slopping it up there on the altar and saying, good, walk away, that's been paid for, and our hearts have not changed as a result of it. Let's read, let's see here, Hebrews 13, 15 through 16. Therefore, by him let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to Elohim. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But do not forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifices Elohim is well pleased. So here the writer of Hebrews talks about praising him, doing good deeds for people, helping those people, which sometimes may be a sacrifice. It may be a sacrifice for you to go help this person over here, especially if they can't pay you back. You're sacrificing your time, your talent, your treasure. You're laying your life down to be the hands and the feet and the arms of Yeshua the Messiah. That's a sacrifice. That shows a heart that's willing to serve and to lay your life down on the altar to help advance the kingdom of Elohim, to serve your fellow man who's in need. Romans 12, verse 1, Paul says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to Elohim, which is your reasonable service. In other words, Yeshua has done all this for you. The least you can do is serve him by being a living sacrifice, by giving, by sharing, by helping, by praising, by praying, by worshiping. Psalm 69, verse 31. I think we already read that one. Hosea 6, verse 6 says, for I desire, Yehovah speaking, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of Elohim more than burnt offerings. See, this shows that Yehovah was not ultimately pleased with all the burnt offerings. He wanted people whose hearts desired him, and they wanted to learn about him more than just throwing offerings at him legalistically, as if, if I just pay this, then I can, I can do whatever I want after that. Hebrews 10, verses 5 through 6. Therefore, when he came into the world, speaking about Yeshua, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body for you have prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you had no pleasure. So here we're seeing that all of those sacrificed animals in the sacrificial system, Yehovah ultimately did not have pleasure in them. Killing innocent animals for what? But it pointed to Yeshua, his ultimate sacrifice that would take away all the sins of the world. And that's what this all pointed to. Micah 6, 7 through 8. Will Yehovah be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. What does Yehovah require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your Elohim. That's what Yehovah wants. A circumcised heart. One that's willing to lay their life down on the altar of sacrifice, on the cross, to go where Yeshua went, to be as Yeshua was, to lay his life down as a living sacrifice for Elohim, before Elohim, and for our fellow man. Psalm 40 verse 6, sacrifice and offering you did not desire. My ears you have opened. Burnt offering and sin offering you did not require. Jeremiah 7, 22 through 23. For I did not speak to your fathers or command them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this is what I commanded them, saying, obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall be my people, and walk in all my ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well with you. So, he did not give them the sacrificial system, the Israelites, when they first came out of Egypt. That was added because of their sin of the golden calf. That was added. As Galatians 3:19 points out. And it was added until the time of Yeshua. And now Yeshua has come, and we don't need that anymore. There's no way we can do it. But now he's brought us to a higher level of prayer, praise, worship, doing good deeds to those who are in need around us. And then Yeshua said in Matthew 12 verse 7, quoting, I think it's Hosea, but if you had known that this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. So you hear Yeshua saying, look, the Father was more important or more interested about heart issues. He wants his people to be merciful and be tender and be loving, more than just legalistically throwing sacrifices at him, but their hearts remaining hard. Now, I want to relate this to prayer, because prayer is a place how we commune, or a way that we commune with Elohim. And it's a way that we offer up prayer, or also offer up praise and worship. It's the sacrifice of our lips, as we read. And I'm not going to go into this. I will be doing more on this later. But there's about a dozen types of prayer that I want to talk about. And it's just a real brief introduction. And this is not in any particular order, but when we commune with Elohim, it's talking with him, it's communing with him, it's abiding with him, it's spending time with him. That's what he wants, is inclining our hearts toward him. And prayer will involve worship, it will involve praise, it can involve music, it can involve people coming together and praying, but it's all a form of sacrifice of praise, being a living sacrifice. The types of prayers that we want to talk about here, and we're just going to mention, are imprecatory prayers, like Psalm 17 and 28, where David is praying that Yehovah will protect him and avenge him of his enemies. Intercessionary prayers, where we're praying for other people. There are many examples of that. Personal intercession, praying for oneself, like Psalm 39. Personal faith statements and declarations that we make in our prayers. Praise and exaltation of Yehovah in our prayers, Psalm 29 and 34. Prophetic prayer, Psalm 22 and 45. Repentance prayer, where we're actually repenting of our sins, Psalm 41 verse 4, Psalm 51, Daniel 9 verse 20. Prayer of defense or self-assertion, where we're actually pleading our case before Yehovah in the courts of heaven. Psalm 41, 11 through 12 is an example of that. Spiritual warfare type prayer. Supplication prayer, where we're making our petitions, our requests, our pleas for mercy known to him. Ephesians 6 to 18, Luke 21, 36, Psalm 25, 28 and 38. And sometimes supplication is combined with worship in Psalm 25, or sometimes supplication is combined with personal faith declarations in Psalm 39, and so forth. And then there's thanksgiving prayer. Offer up the thanks, praise and thanksgiving to Him. Philippians 4:6, Psalm 44, and there's worship prayer. There's many psalms that fit into that category. So, prayer, or this aspect of being a living sacrifice, and with the focus on prayer here, this is just a little side teaching I want to put in here for you and make this idea of being a living sacrifice very practical. I think we all need to step up our game when it comes to prayer. But prayer involves any form of communication with Yehovah if done from a right heart. It can involve silent meditation, Psalm 4, verses 4 through 5, audible speaking or crying out, or crying for help, Psalm 5:1, singing and music, Psalm I did not write down the psalm on this one, but there are psalms that were set to music and they were prayers. So I'm going to have to go check my notes on that one. And then there's psalms sometimes that involve groanings. With regard to, literally crying out from the innermost depths of a being. With regard to singing and music, look for the psalms that have at the heading, a prayer of David, and then it's set to music, and he commands it to be set to music, and follow that would be a prayer that was actually set to music. A prayer can be audible and passionate. Psalm 3:4. We pray in times of life's trials and tribulations. Psalm chapter 3. We must expect an answer when we pray. Now, I'm giving you what I call the practicalities and the dynamics of prayer. I'm just going through this real quickly. We'll come back to this again some other time, but I just kind of want to get you thinking along these lines. And maybe you can look up these chapter verses, and hopefully it will stimulate and energize your own personal prayer life. Expect an answer when you pray. Psalm 4, verse 1. Silent meditation and prayer go hand in hand. Psalm 4, verses 4 through 5. And Psalm 4:8. Vocalized prayer and singing go hand in hand. And that is Psalm 5, verses 0 through 3. So if you look, I say verse 0 because the super heading, which is in the Hebrew, above verse 1, talks about to the choir master for the flutes, a psalm of David. And then he says, give ear to my word, O Yehovah, and consider my groanings. Give attention to my cry. So he's talking about praying musically. And I think that's the chapter I was referring to up here about praying involving song and music. That would be Psalm chapter 5. To the choir master for the flutes, a psalm of David, give ear to my words. So here he's praying to Yehovah through music. Some of you, maybe will sit down and sing to Yehovah, or play on a musical instrument, or if you lead a prayer group, you can play music and people can be praying while this is going on. Yehovah doesn't hear prideful and boastful prayers. Again, I don't have time to go through all these. But that's proverb, the parable of the publican and the Pharisee, Psalm 5, verses 1 through 6. Prayer can involve weeping and groaning and grief, Psalm 6 through 9. Prayer can be made while sitting or laying on any piece of furniture, Psalm 6. Musical prayer can be an expression of high praise and worship of Elohim, Psalm 8, 1 through 9, and 9, 1 through 11. Sometimes it seems that Yehovah never answers prayers, even in times of great need. David experienced this. Psalm 13, 1 through 3. Prayer involves lifting up one's soul, that is one's mind, will, and emotion, or one's total being to Yehovah. Psalm 25, verse 1. Prayer can involve lifting up one's hands as a trusting child to his Abba as a sign of trusting surrender. Psalm 28, verse 2. Prayer is a refuge from the troubles from trouble or one's enemies. It's a way to enter the temple or the presence of Yehovah and to find strength and solidity. Psalm 27, 4 through 6. So these are all aspects of worship, all aspects of sacrifice, the sacrifice of our lips, the sacrifice of praise, being living sacrifices. Prayer is a huge aspect to walking this concept out of sacrifice, because you got to sacrifice your time. There's probably things you'd rather be doing than on your knees praying. But if your heart is really right and you love Yehovah Elohim, you will want to be praying. You will want to spend time with Him every day. Prayer involves having a heart of longing desire for Yehovah, to be in His presence. This is Psalm 42, verses 1 through 2. And I'm going to read this one. As the deer pants for the water brook, so my soul pants my soul for you, O Elohim. My soul thirsts for Elohim, for the living Elohim. When shall I come and appear before Elohim? And is that not the desire of all of our hearts, to be in His presence? Prayer involves pouring out our soul, our mind, and will and emotions to Yehovah. Psalm 42:4. When I remember these things, I pour out my soul within me. Quoting David. Not only do we need to pray, but we need to listen when Yehovah speaks back, and so forth. He'll speak to us during the prayers. And there's the psalm that says, "Hear, O my people, and I will speak, O Israel, and I will testify against you. I am Yehovah your Elohim." And Yehovah's throne room, or Holy of Holies, is a place of prayer. Psalm 28, verse 2. Hear the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cry to you for help, when I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary. Psalm 24, 4 through 6 and 30. Remember, we talked about earlier, the tabernacle of Moses is a picture of heaven, and the Holy of Holies is a picture of the throne room of Elohim. And when we pray, when we make the sacrifice of our lips, the sacrifice of praise, the sacrifice of our lives, we become living sacrifices, we're coming into the Holy of Holies, the presence of Elohim. And it says in Revelation 5:18, I believe, in 8 verse 3, it says that the prayers of the saints are like incense that are coming up, sweet smelling incense coming up before Yehovah Elohim. And where did they get the coals? Remember, the priests would take hot coals and they would pour incense. They put the hot coals into a censer, and then they would put incense over the top of them, and the incense would burn, and it would burn inside the Holy of Holies before the veil going into the Holy, into the Holy of Holies. They burn it twice daily in the holy place before the veil that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies, and that is a picture of coming into His presence, His throne room, there before the mercy seat and the Ark of the Covenant there in the Holy of Holies, which is a picture of His throne room, and that's picturing the saints coming to Yeshua, or coming to Yeshua and Elohim in heaven through prayer, and through worship, and through praise. It's a sweet-smelling incense, and the coals that they got to burn the incense came from the altar of sacrifice. There's back the connection between the sacrificial altar that the animals were sacrificed on, and our praise, and our worship, and our prayer. Here we see the connection between sacrifice and prayer. Wow. So, Psalm 32, verse 7. Again, when we pray, it's like coming into the throne room of Elohim. David said in Psalm 32, verse 7, "You are my hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with shouts of deliverance." So we can find our place of refuge and our hiding place in the throne room of Elohim, and we can enter there through the blood of Yeshua and through prayer and praise and worship, being a living sacrifice, laying our lives down at the foot of the cross, taking up the cross and following Yeshua and worshiping Him in spirit and truth there in the throne room of Elohim here on the earth. The Bible says in Ephesians, we're seated with Yeshua. I think it's either Ephesians or Colossians. We're seated with Yeshua in heavenly places. We have a place there. We come there through the Spirit. We come there through prayer, through worship and praise. And sometimes some of you have probably been in deep prayer and you've sensed the presence, the anointing, the glory of the Elohim all around you, and you're in such deep prayer that you don't want to leave that spot. It is so beautiful. It's such a feeling of peace and of joy and well-being that the time flies by when you're in that place. And may we all come to that place where we can commune with Him individually and collectively as with other believers, other like-minded people, and experience what the higher levels of sacrifice are all about. For the glory and the praise of Yehovah Elohim, we offer this as a sweet-smelling savor and a sacrifice before Him that we pray is acceptable and honorable in His sight. Amen. Hallelujah.
Be found, call upon His name. He is near. He is near. He is near. Yeshua Hashem Behir Matzov Keravu Yoto Karov Karov Yasov Rasha Darko Yishavim Machshevotav Yashovel Ad Hashem Ki Arbe Is Yeshua Hashem Behir Matzov Keravu Yota Seek the Lord while He may be found. Call upon His name. He is near. He is near. Yeshua Hashem Behir Matzot